Hello everyone, welcome to this version of CSS challenge. Today our challenge is to build this testimonial slider. We are asked to build this testimonial slider just HTML and CSS, no JavaScript. Okay, so pause this video. Try this challenge on your own before we build this together. Welcome back. I hope you were able to try this challenge on your own. So relax and let's build this together. If you're on Windows, you can open your command prompt. And if you're Mac, simply open your terminal. So here I'm going to move into my desktop. So I will simply type cd desktop and hit enter. And right here in my desktop, I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to call this testimonial. Okay, so let's move into this testimonial folder by simply typing cd, then the name of the folder, which is testimonial. Hit enter. So currently I am inside this testimonial folder. So we are going to open this folder using our code editor, and I can directly do that from my terminal by typing code then dot. Okay, great. So this opened the folder we created right in our code editor. The first thing we are going to do is to create a file, and we are going to call this index.html. Let's use the shortcut. So we simply type exclamation mark and hit enter. Okay, so let's change the title to testimonial slider. Okay, so now let's open this our HTML file in our browser, and in this video I am going to be using an extension. This is called Lifesaver. Okay, so simply click on the first one, and here you are going to see install. I already have it installed. Okay, simply click on install. Once you install Lifesaver, down here on your code editor you are going to see this go live. Simply click on go live. Great. Now this here is our web page. Inside this body, let's simply add a section. Okay, and let's give this section a class of testimonial slider. So inside this section, let's add a container, and for that we are going to be using a div. And let's give this particular div a class of slider. Let's add another div. And for this second div, let's give this a class of slide. Great. Inside this second div, let's add a paragraph. So here let's write, okay, and let's wrap this in a double quote. Okay, so we simply use the HTML entity, and in this case this should be quotes. Okay, so we use this. Let's copy this and paste that here. Okay, let's save this, and now we have this. Great. After this paragraph, let's add an image. Okay, and for this image we are going to be making use of free images from Pravata. So right here in your browser, simply type Pravata. Okay, and hit enter. Open the first option. Great. So we are going to be making use of all these images. How do we actually use that? Now here we have an example of how we can actually use this image, and we can also specify the size of the image. Now the one we are going to be using is actually this particular one. So you can copy this link, and here in the source simply paste that and save this file. Great. So now we have this image. Now you can change this number. If you change this number, it's going to change the image. Okay, so if you change the number, you have a different image. If you change this to 10, that also gives us a different image. So let's actually leave this at 5. And for the auth here, let's simply say avatar. And after this image, let's add h3. And for this, let's simply say Jessica Lane. Then let's now add a span, and this span should hold Jessica's profession. So Jessica is a front-end developer, and let's save this. Good. We are going to copy this particular div, and let's repeat that 3 times. Okay, so we copy this and paste, then we paste this again. Now let's change the text here, and we are going to change that to best coding teacher on YouTube. I finally understand CSS. Okay, and for this picture, let's change this to 8. So we have this guy. Let's change this name to Kim Michael, and he is a web designer. Then finally, let's change the text here. okay, and let's change this image to 7, okay, and for the name Bob Augustine, and he is a full stack engineer. Okay, so now we have this. Great. The next thing we are going to do now is to use CSS to actually turn this to look exactly like what we have here. Remember, no JavaScript. Okay, so that is the challenge. Let's go. Now let's create another file here and let's call this styles.css. Now let's link this file to our HTML file, and we can do that using the link tag. Okay, and here let's specify styles.css. Great. So the first thing we are going to do, we are going to use the universal selector to select everything on the page, and let's set the margin to 0, padding to 0, box sizing, border box. Okay, so this is simply a general reset. Okay, now let's select the body, and for the body let's set the font family. For now, let's simply use sans serif. Okay, let's change the background. Here let's use linear gradients. For this we use 145 degree, and for the color let's use E3E DFS. Here let's say F9 FB. So we have this particular background. Let's set the body to a flex container. Okay, so we simply say display of flex. Why are we setting this body to a flex container? Remember, the body contains just this section. So when we set this body to a flex container, this particular section becomes a flex item, right? So we set display to flex. We justify content to the center. Okay, so that moves everything to the center. Let's also align items to the center, that's vertically, and let's set the min height to 100 viewport height. Great. So currently we have this. Now let's move on and style this testimonial slider. Okay, so for this session we added a class of testimonial slider. You can simply copy this class and go back to the style sheet. So dot testimonial slider. So first we want to set a fixed width of 420 pixels. Let's set the background to RGBA. Okay, and for the alpha let's use 0.4. Okay, so now we have this. So you see that this background is lighter than that of the body. Let's add a box shadow. So for the horizontal let's use 0.25 pixels, 80 pixels, RGBA let's use 0, 0, 0, then 0.15. Okay, let's add a backdrop filter, and here we say blur 16 pixel. Then we add the WebKit backdrop filter. We use the same blur 16 pixels. Okay, let's set the overflow to hidden, and let's add border of 1 pixel solid. Then let's use RGBA 255 0.2. Okay, now let's select the slider, and before we do anything, let's go back and see why we are selecting this slider. Now this slider is the parent container to the slides. Okay, so we have 3 divs here with the class of slide, then we have a particular div with the class of slider. This slider is the parent element, the parent container hosting these 3 divs. Okay, so when we set this particular slider to a flex container, that means that we have 3 flex items. Okay, great. Now let's see this in action. So for the slider we simply set display to flex, and you see now we have the 3 items all in a row, because by default when you set display to flex it pushes everything into a row. Okay, so the flex direction by default is row. Great. Now let's set the width of this particular container to 1260 pixels. Okay, and let's add some animation. For the name let's simply say slide and 15 seconds, infinite, and in this case let's say is in out. Now let's select each slide, and for each slide we now want to set the width to 420 pixels. Let's add some padding of 2.5 rem. Let's test align to the center. Okay, so now we have this, and let's change the text color. Let's use 2B. Great. Now let's tie each items here. So we are going to select the paragraph inside the slide. Okay, so the paragraph inside this slide, we want to increase the font size to 1.05 rem. Let's change the font style. So we want that to be italic. So we set this to italic. Let's set the line height to 1.7. Let's use 1.6, and let's add margin bottom of 1.5 rem. So we have this, and this look amazing actually. Let's style the image. Okay, so dot slide img. So here we are selecting the image element itself. Let's set the width to 75 pixels. Okay, so we're going to set the width and also the height to 75 pixels. Why? Because in the finished project here, the image is what is rounded, is a circle, right? So for us to have full circle and not oval shape, the width and height must be the same thing. Okay, so here now we can set the border radius to 50% and save this. Now we have this. Okay, great. Let's add some margin bottom, and here we are using margin and not padding because we want space between the image and the text here. So we want space between two elements, and in that case we simply use margin, not padding. Okay, so here let's say 1 rem. Let's also add border. Let's use 3 pieces solid, and for the color we use RGBA 000. Then let this be 0.5. Okay, so now we have this border here. Great. Let's add some box shadow. Okay, so for the horizontal offset, this should be 0, vertical 4 pieces, and for the blur radius let's use 12 pieces. And for the color, let's simply use RGBA 000. Then let this alpha be 0.1. Let's add some transition. Okay, remove this column. We don't need it there. Great. So now we have this. Now, when we hover on this image, look at the finished project. Now, when you hover on this image, you see there is an effect. Let's do that. So we simply select the image inside the slide, and in this case, we add the over pseudo class, and we simply set transform to scale 1.08. Okay, and remember here we add transition basically on this transform, and now we add this transform on the over pseudo class. Great. Okay, so now we have this. Let's now style this our H3. So we select the H3 inside the slide. Let's increase the font size to 1.15 rem. Let's add margin 0.4 rem up and down and 0 left and right. Let's change the color to 1E 1E 1E. Okay, so now we have this, and this looks good. Let's also style the span, and for that we set the font size to 0.9 rem, and let's change the color to, let's use 6E 6E 6E. Now we have this. But look at our own product and look at the finished project. Something is happening here. And in this case, we are not using JavaScript. So let's see how we can achieve this effect using just CSS. And to achieve that, we are simply going to use the keyframes. The CSS keyframes, we simply controls the intermediate steps in our CSS animation sequence. Okay, and we simply do this by using @keyframes. Now we need to add the identifier, and in this case this is going to be slide. Okay, and here let's simply use percentage. So at 0% we want transform, and this should actually translate x0. Okay, then let's set for 33%, and for 33% we want transform, and this is going to translate x. This should be minus 420 pixels. Okay, which is the size of this slide. Okay, if you go to this slide, we set the width as 420 pixels. So here we say 420 pixels. Then let's add 33 plus 33, which is 66%. So we translate S, and in this case it's going to be double of 420, which should be 840 pixels. And finally, at 100%, we want to transform. We translate X back to 0, and let's save this. Once we save this and go to our page, you see now we have this. Now you see how we use the keyframe to define how our item should actually animate step by step over a period of time. Okay, so for 0%, we start at the very first slide, and for 33%, we slide the whole container left by one slide. If we slide the whole container left by one slide, That means we should be in the second. Okay, then we now slide the container again to the left by 2 slides, and that moves us to the third container. And finally, we reset everything back to 0, which moves straight to the first slide. I hope this is clear enough. If you need this code or you have any question, simply make use of the comment section below. Thanks for being part of this challenge. Thanks for being part of this challenge. See you in the next one. One love.